What if every mask you wore was slowly stealing your soul? What if the love that set you free was the very trap that would destroy you? Tonight, we dive into the haunting world of Alara, a lonely florist whose life changes forever when mysterious masks begin appearing at her doorstep every full moon. One enchanted evening, she finally puts one on and finds herself pulled into the Twilight Court, a realm where beauty masks danger, where love hides betrayal, and where removing your mask could mean losing everything, or discovering that the man you're falling for is your greatest enemy. This is a story of forbidden love across worlds, of choices that shatter souls, and of a woman who must decide whether love is worth the ultimate sacrifice. If you're ready to feel every stolen glance, every whispered promise, every heart-wrenching betrayal, hit subscribe, turn up your volume, and let yourself fall into the court of masks and moonbeams. The Twilight Court's ballroom was in deadly silence, hundreds of pairs of supernatural eyes fixed on Alara as she tore the silver mask from her face with trembling hands, revealing her mortal skin, pale, vulnerable, utterly human among creatures of ancestral power. The music had stopped abruptly, leaving only the echo of her heavy breathing reverberating through the black marble columns. No, she whispered to herself. It can't be him. It can't be. Finally! The voice that emerged from the shadows was too familiar, too terrifying. My little spy. The man she knew as Kale, the Shadow Lord, the one she had fallen for during months of secret balls, stepped forward. But now she could see beyond the liquid silver mask that had always hidden his features. She could see the face that haunted her in both dreams and waking hours. Marcus, her Marcus from the mortal world, the man who frequented her flower shop, who made her heart race with shy smiles and conversations about rare petals. The realization hit her like an icy blade piercing her chest. All the months of loneliness, all the magical balls, all the stolen moments of intimacy, everything had been an elaborate lie. You used me, she managed to articulate, her voice breaking like ancient crystal. In both worlds, you used me. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these beings who fed on human emotions like hungry predators. Kyle, Marcus, whoever he really was, tilted his head slightly, and for a moment, something like pain crossed his eternally young eyes. Alara, you don't understand. I never wanted. But his words were cut off by the sound of slow clapping echoing through the hall. An elegant figure emerged from the shadows, a woman of supernatural beauty wearing a mask of fragmented mirrors that reflected 1,000 distorted versions of the scene. What a touching performance, Lady Seraphina purred, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. But I think our dear Alara deserves to know the complete truth about her beloved, and about why she's really here. The transition was smooth as liquid silk, taking us back in time to a full moon night 6 months prior. Alara Chen was closing her small flower shop, Petals and Dreams, when she heard a soft sound at the door, as if something delicate had been placed there with reverent care. The wind chime hanging on the porch chimed once, then fell into suspicious silence. She hesitated, keys trembling slightly in her hand. At 28, she had learned to mistrust surprises, especially those that arrived when the city slept. When she finally opened the door, she found a small, elegant box resting on the worn entrance mat. Inside, nestled in midnight blue silk, was the most beautiful mask she had ever seen, pure silver worked in patterns of vines and lunar crescents, with crystals that seemed to capture and reflect light that didn't exist. A single letter accompanied the gift, written in elegant calligraphy that seemed to dance on the page. For she who carries magic in her hands, but has forgotten she also possesses it in her heart. What kind of joke is this? She murmured, turning the mask carefully. The metal was warm to the touch, as if it had been heated by living hands, and she swore she felt a pulse, faint but definite, running through the silver fibers. Back then, Alara still believed in coincidences and rational explanations. She had placed the mask back in its box with trembling hands, locked everything in a drawer, and tried to forget. But the dreams began that very night. Dreams of ethereal ballrooms, of music that made her blood sing, of a deep, silky voice whispering her name in the shadows. Month after month, always on the full moon, a new mask appeared, gold worked with diamond tears. black obsidian polished until it shone like stars, emerald jade that seemed to pulse with its own life. With each new delivery, the dreams became more vivid, more insistent, and each morning, Alara woke with the taste of fairy wine on her tongue and the echo of a waltz she had never heard playing in her mind. "I'm going insane," she whispered to the flowers in her shop, which always seemed to lean in her direction when she spoke, as if they were listening. Or maybe I was already insane long ago, and I'm only now allowing myself to feel it. The changes started subtly, like watercolors bleeding into white paper. Alara's flowers began lasting impossibly long. Roses that should have wilted in 3 days still bloomed perfect and fragrant after 2 weeks. Customers started commenting on how the shop felt different. "Magical," one elderly woman had said, running her fingers along lily petals that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light. "Like stepping into a fairy tale." But it wasn't just the flowers. Alara herself was changing in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. Her grandmother's old journal, discovered while cleaning the attic, revealed family secrets that made her blood run cold. The Chen women have always walked between worlds. Her grandmother had written in faded ink, "We are the bridge builders, the dream weavers, the ones who remember what others choose to forget. But power comes with a price, my dear granddaughter, and some doors once opened can never be closed again." The journal spoke of fairy bloodlines, of ancient pacts, of women in her family who had disappeared without trace, always during full moons, always leaving behind only withered flowers and empty beds. It was during this time of growing uncertainty that Marcus first walked into her shop. Tall and lean, with dark hair that seemed to absorb light, and eyes the color of stormy seas, he moved with a predator's grace that made her heart stutter. "I'm looking for something unusual," he had said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. Old world, aristocratic, tinged with sadness that spoke of centuries rather than years. Something that speaks to lost souls. She had recommended moonflowers, night-blooming jasmine, ghost orchids, flowers that thrived in darkness and mystery. His smile when she handed him the arrangement had been devastating in its beauty and heartbreaking in its loneliness. "You understand darkness," he had observed, fingers brushing hers as he took the bouquet. The touch sent electricity through her veins, followed by visions, brief, chaotic flashes of starlit ballrooms, silver masks, ancient magic pulsing through veins like liquid moonlight. "Most people fear it, but you dance with it." That night, the dreams were stronger than ever. She dreamed of waltzing with a masked stranger whose touch set her soul on fire, whose voice whispered promises of love and power and choices that would reshape her very existence. When she woke, she found silver rose petals scattered across her pillow, petals that dissolved like mist when touched, leaving behind only the scent of magic and the echo of a name, Kale. The night everything changed began like all the others, with the appearance of a new mask on her doorstep. But this one was different. Where the previous masks had been beautiful, this one was breathtaking in its terrible perfection. Black crystal worked through with veins of gold that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, set with obsidian gems that reflected not light, but something deeper, something that looked disturbingly like trapped souls. The moment her fingers touched its surface, the world tilted sideways. "I can't keep pretending this isn't real," Alara whispered to her reflection in the shop's mirror, the mask cradled in her hands like a forbidden treasure. Her reflection seemed different somehow, older, sadder, as if it carried the weight of choices not yet made. The loneliness had become unbearable. 6 months of watching other people's love stories bloom in her flower arrangements while her own life withered like unwatered plants. Marcus visited regularly now, their conversations growing longer and more intimate, but there was always something held back, some invisible wall between them that made her ache with unfinished longing. That evening, as the full moon rose like a silver coin against the velvet sky, Alara made the choice that would alter her destiny forever. Standing in her apartment, surrounded by the accumulated masks of half a year's mysterious gifts, she lifted the black crystal mask to her face. The moment it touched her skin, reality exploded into fragments of light and shadow. Her cramped apartment dissolved, replaced by the most magnificent ballroom she had ever imagined. And she had imagined it, night after night in dreams that felt more real than waking. The transformation was complete and instantaneous. Her simple cotton dress became liquid silk, that moved like living shadow. Midnight blue shot through with silver threads that caught light from crystal chandeliers suspended in defiance of gravity. Her bare feet were shod in delicate slippers that made no sound on the marble floor inlaid with constellations of precious stones. But the most shocking change was in herself. She felt powerful, as if magic flowed through her veins like warm honey, as if she could command the very air around her to bend to her will. "Welcome to the Twilight Court," a voice said behind her, and when she turned, she saw him, Kale, the Shadow Lord, exactly as he had appeared in her dreams, but more real, more devastating, more dangerous than any dream could contain. Kale moved toward her with the fluid grace of smoke given form, and Alara's breath caught in her throat. Up close, he was even more magnificent, and more terrifying than her dreams had prepared her for. His mask of liquid silver seemed to shift and flow with his expressions, revealing glimpses of sharp cheekbones, a mouth curved in a smile that promised both pleasure and pain, eyes that held the depth of centuries and the weight of ancient sorrows. When he extended his hand, she noticed his fingers were long and elegant, adorned with rings that caught the ethereal light and threw it back in patterns that made her dizzy. "You've finally come home," he said, his voice wrapping around her like velvet chains. But he didn't touch her, couldn't touch her, she realized with growing confusion. His hand hovered inches from hers, and she could feel heat radiating from his skin, could sense the barely controlled power that hummed beneath his composed exterior. "In the Twilight Court, we dance without contact, my lady. Physical touch would complicate things beyond imagining." The way he said it, loaded with meaning and forbidden longing, made her pulse race. The dance that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. They moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies mirroring each other's movements without ever making contact, close enough to share breath, but never allowed to truly touch. It was torture and ecstasy combined, a seduction more intimate than any physical caress could have been. As they danced, Alara became aware of other couples moving around them, beings of impossible beauty, wearing masks of every conceivable material, their movements hypnotic and alien. But she only had eyes for Kale, who danced as if he was pouring his very soul out through movement. "Why can't we touch?" she whispered during a turn that brought them close enough for her to see her reflection fracturing in his silver mask. His smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. "Because touch binds, my dear Alara, and some of us are already bound by chains far stronger than flesh." As he spoke, she caught glimpses of images in his mask, flashes of memory that weren't her own. A mortal man screaming in agony, a woman's betrayal, blood on silver, a curse spoken in a language that predated human civilization. "You've been human," she breathed, understanding flooding through her like ice water. "You're like me." But before he could answer, the clock began to chime midnight, and his expression shifted to something approaching panic. "Remember, little dreamer, not all who wear masks in this court choose to do so. Some of us are prisoners of our own faces." And then he was gone, dissolved into shadow, leaving her standing alone in the center of the ballroom with those cryptic words echoing in her mind. Alara's return to the mortal world was jarring, like being pulled from warm honey into ice water. She found herself standing in her apartment, still wearing her simple cotton dress, but her skin glowed with residual magic that made her bathroom mirror reflect someone she barely recognized. Her eyes held flecks of silver that hadn't been there before, and when she ran her fingers through her hair, strands of midnight blue caught the light like captured starlight. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. But part of her already knew. The Twilight Court had awakened something in her blood, something that had been dormant for generations. The changes weren't just cosmetic. When she touched her dying orchid the next morning, it bloomed instantly, petals unfurling in impossible shades of purple and gold. Customers began lingering in her shop longer than necessary, drawn by an energy they couldn't name. Mrs. Patterson, who had bought the same white roses every week for her late husband's grave, broke down crying when she entered the shop. "It feels like he's here," she sobbed, "like the flowers are singing his name." Alara's gift, whatever it was, seemed to amplify emotions, to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. But it was Marcus's reaction that truly unnerved her. When he arrived for his weekly visit, he stopped dead in the doorway, his face cycling through expressions of recognition, confusion, and something that looked disturbingly like fear. "You've changed," he said quietly, his usual easy smile nowhere to be found. "There's something different about you. Something familiar." When she handed him his usual arrangement of night-blooming flowers, his fingers lingered on hers a moment too long, and she saw his pupils dilate as if he was fighting some internal battle. "Have we met before?" she found herself asking, studying his face with new intensity. There was something about the curve of his jaw, the way he held his shoulders, the careful way he moved that reminded her of— No, the thought was impossible. Cale was a creature of magic and moonlight, trapped in the Twilight Court for centuries. Marcus was human, solid, real. He had calloused hands from garden work, drove a beat-up Honda, complained about the weather like any ordinary person. But when he looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, she felt the same electric pull, the same sense of destiny and danger intertwined. "In dreams, perhaps," he murmured, backing toward the door with movements that were too graceful, too predatory for a simple gardener. "We all meet in dreams, don't we?" That night, her dreams were chaos, fragments of memories that belonged to someone else, images of a man being torn between two worlds, and through it all, a voice screaming in anguish, "Don't make me choose between them. Please, I can't lose her in both worlds." The pull of the second mask was irresistible, arriving exactly 1 month later with the same mysterious precision. This time it was crafted from what looked like crystallized moonlight, translucent white shot through with veins of silver that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. The accompanying note was different too, written in handwriting she was beginning to recognize. "Some truths can only be seen through borrowed eyes. Tonight, you see through mine." When she placed the mask over her face, the transformation was more violent than before. Instead of the gentle dissolution she remembered, reality shattered like glass, each fragment showing her a different version of the Twilight Court. In one shard, she saw the ballroom as it truly was, ancient beyond measure, built from the bones of forgotten gods and mortared with the tears of the lost. In another, she glimpsed the courtiers without their masks, revealing faces that were beautiful but hollow, as if their souls had been carved out with silver knives. "You're learning to see." Cale's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, and when she turned, she found him standing closer than the rules should have allowed. His silver mask had become transparent, and she could see his face clearly for the first time. Sharp, aristocratic features that would have been beautiful if not for the haunting sadness that seemed carved into every line. The court shows different faces to different observers. Most see only what they wish to see, but you have the sight. As he spoke, she realized she could see through his mask to the man beneath, and her heart nearly stopped. The resemblance to Marcus wasn't just strong, it was impossible to ignore. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping closer despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "Who are you, really?" For the first time since she'd known him, Cale's composure cracked. Pain flashed across his features. Raw, devastating pain that spoke of loss beyond imagining. I am someone who made a choice that damned him to existence in two worlds and peace in neither." His voice broke on the words. "I loved someone once in the mortal realm, loved her enough to sacrifice everything, but the court demanded a price I didn't understand until it was too late." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Around them, other courtiers had begun to watch with predatory interest, sensing drama unfolding. Lady Seraphina emerged from a cluster of nobles, her mirror mask reflecting fractured images of Alara's shocked face. "Oh, how delicious," she purred. "He hasn't told you yet, has he? About the binding that keeps him anchored to both worlds? About how every moment he spends falling in love with you here makes him forget her there?" Her laughter was like breaking crystal. "Tell me, sweet Alara, if you discovered that saving the man you love required destroying the mortal who shares his soul, what would you choose?" Back in the mortal world, Alara threw herself into research with the desperate intensity of someone whose sanity depended on finding answers. Her grandmother's journal became her Bible, its faded pages revealing family secrets that made her blood run cold. The Chen women hadn't just been bridge builders between worlds. They'd been guardians, protectors of the barriers that kept the supernatural realm from bleeding into the mortal one. And they'd paid for that duty with their lives, their loves, their very souls. "The binding curse is old magic," her grandmother had written in increasingly frantic handwriting toward the journal's end. designed to punish those who would use love to cross between worlds. The victim is split. Part of their soul remains in the magical realm, while part is reborn in the mortal world with no memory of what was lost. They exist in torment, always searching for something they can't name, always feeling incomplete. The only way to break such a curse is through willing sacrifice, but the price is always higher than anyone expects. Marcus's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. He visited the shop almost daily now, but their conversations had taken on a dreamlike quality, as if he was fighting to stay present in his own body. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with recognition so intense it took her breath away. Other times he seemed genuinely confused about why he kept coming back. "I have these dreams," he confessed one afternoon, his hands shaking as he arranged baby's breath in a vase. "Dreams where I'm someone else, somewhere else. And you're there, but you're different, more than human. And I love you so much it's killing me. But I can't touch you, can't have you, can't even tell you the truth about what I really am." "What truth?" Alara whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus looked up at her then, and for just a moment, his eyes held centuries of pain and longing, exactly like Kale's. "That I'm not who you think I am, that I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed, that loving me will destroy you, but I'm too selfish to stay away." He set down the flowers with hands that trembled. "Sometimes I remember things that never happened to me. A court made of moonlight and shadow. A woman in a crystal mask who holds my heart in her hands. A choice I made that split my very soul in half. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Somehow, impossibly, Marcus and Kale were the same person. Two halves of a soul torn apart by magic she didn't understand. But if that was true, then every moment she spent falling in love with one of them was a betrayal of the other. And somewhere in the Twilight Court, Lady Seraphina was pulling strings, orchestrating a tragedy that would destroy them all. "I have to know the truth," she whispered to herself as she locked up the shop. "Whatever it costs me, I have to know what really happened to create this curse." That night, she didn't wait for a mask to appear. She sought out the oldest, most powerful one she owned, the original silver mask that had started everything, and put it on with the full intention of demanding answers from whatever powers ruled the Twilight Court. The court welcomed her return with an atmosphere of anticipation so thick she could taste it on the air like copper pennies and burnt roses. But this time, instead of the ballroom, she found herself in a place she'd never seen before, a vast library, where books floated through the air like lazy butterflies, their pages whispering secrets in languages that predated human speech. At the library's heart sat a woman who looked ancient and ageless simultaneously, her silver hair flowing like liquid mercury, her eyes holding the weight of every choice ever made. "Morgana," the woman introduced herself, not looking up from the tapestry she was weaving on a loom made of crystallized starlight. "The fates call me the Weaver, though I prefer to think of myself as an editor of destiny's rougher drafts." Each thread she worked with glowed with its own light, some golden, some silver, some so dark they seemed to devour illumination. As Alara watched, fascinated despite her fear, she realized the tapestry depicted scenes from her own life, threads interconnected in patterns too complex for mortal minds to fully grasp. "You want to know about the curse that binds your beloved," Morgana continued, her fingers never pausing in their work, "about how one soul came to inhabit two forms, and why love has become his punishment instead of his salvation." With a gesture, she caused the threads to rearrange themselves, showing new scenes. A young man in medieval clothing kneeling before a fairy court, tears streaming down his face as he begged for something precious to be restored. His name was Kieran then, and he was much like you, caught between worlds, blessed and cursed with the ability to see beyond the veil. The story Morgana wove was heartbreaking in its familiar tragedy. Kieran had fallen in love with a mortal woman, a healer named Elena, whose gifts marked her as having fairy blood. But Elena had been taken by the court, transformed into one of their eternal dancers, her memories wiped clean by magic that fed on mortal pain. "He made the bargain that doomed him," Morgana explained, her voice heavy with centuries of witnessing such tragedies. "His soul split in exchange for Elena's freedom. Part of him would remain here, bound to serve the court as the Shadow Lord Kale. The other part would be reborn in the mortal world, destined to search eternally for what he'd lost, never knowing why he felt incomplete. But Elena? What happened to her? Alara asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Morgana's smile was infinitely sad. Elena was returned to the mortal world, her memories intact, but her fairy gifts sealed away. She lived a full human life, had children, grandchildren. Her bloodline carries traces of both her magic and Kieran's sacrifice. The implication hit Alara like a thunderbolt. I'm her descendant. That's why the masks called to me. That's why I can see through the court's illusions. Morgana nodded. And that's why Kale fell in love with you the moment you appeared. You carry Elena's essence, her soul pattern. To him, loving you feels like coming home and being torn apart simultaneously. When Kale found her in the library, his usual composure was completely shattered. He moved like a man walking toward his own execution, each step heavy with the weight of centuries-old secrets finally being dragged into the light. You know, he said simply, and it wasn't a question. Morgana told you about Kieran, about Elena, about the choice that damned us both. His silver mask had become completely transparent, revealing eyes that held such depth of pain it made her chest ache. Tell me yourself, she demanded, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. I want to hear it from you. All of it. No more half-truths, no more mysterious hints. If I'm going to love you, if I'm going to choose you, I need to know what that choice really means. The word love hung between them like a thrown gauntlet, acknowledging what they'd both been dancing around for months. Kyle flinched as if she'd struck him, but he didn't deny it. I loved her with everything I was, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena was light made manifest, hope given human form. She could heal with a touch, could make flowers bloom in winter, could see the beauty in broken things and somehow make them whole again. As he spoke, his form began to shift slightly, and Alara caught glimpses of who he'd been before. Younger, more human, burning with passion instead of controlled by it. When the court took her, I would have torn apart the very foundations of reality to get her back. And they knew it. They used my desperation against me. The story poured out of him like poison from a wound. How he'd infiltrated the court. How he'd learned their weaknesses. How he'd been prepared to wage war against immortal beings for the sake of one mortal woman's freedom. The bargain seemed simple enough. My soul, split between worlds, in exchange for her complete freedom. Not just physical, but magical. She would return to the mortal realm with her memories and her power intact, free to live whatever life she chose. His laugh was bitter as winter wind. I thought I was being clever. I thought I could outwit creatures who'd been playing with mortal hearts since the dawn of time. But you didn't know about the binding that would keep you searching for her in both forms, Alara finished, understanding flooding through her like ice water. You didn't know that Kale would fall in love with Elena's descendant while Marcus would be drawn to the same woman without knowing why. Kyle nodded, his form becoming more solid as if her understanding gave him strength. Every moment I spend loving you here makes Marcus forget Elena's bloodline more completely there. Every kiss I want to steal from you is a betrayal of the man who shares my soul, and every time he touches you in that world, I feel it here like a knife to the heart, not from jealousy, but from the knowledge that I'm stealing joy from myself. The cruelty of it was breathtaking in its elegance. The court hadn't just punished Kieran for his audacity, they'd created an eternal torture device, a love triangle where all three participants were victims of powers beyond their control. There has to be a way to break it, she said fiercely, stepping closer to him despite every rule of the court. There has to be a choice that doesn't end in sacrifice. But even as she said it, she saw the answer in his eyes. Ancient, resigned, heartbreaking in its finality. There is, my love, but it requires losing everything we've found together, and I'm not strong enough to choose that ending. Not again. Lady Seraphina chose her moment perfectly, materializing from the shadows just as Kale's confession reached its most vulnerable point. Her mirror mask reflected not their faces, but their deepest fears. Ilara saw herself withering away as magic consumed her mortality, while Kale's reflection showed Marcus dying alone and forgotten in the mortal world. How touching, she purred, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The doomed lovers finally speaking truth to each other. But I'm afraid your time for confessions has run out. With a gesture, she summoned the other court nobles. beings of terrible beauty, who moved like predators scenting blood. You see, dear Alara, your presence here has been disruptive. The balance Kieran's curse maintained for 3 centuries is cracking. Magic is bleeding between the worlds, and mortal Marcus grows stronger while our Shadow Lord weakens. As she spoke, Alara could feel the truth in her words, the exhaustion that had been growing in Kyle, the way his form sometimes flickered like a candle in the wind. The solution is elegantly simple, Seraphina continued, circling them like a shark. One of them must die permanently. Kill the mortal Marcus and Kale becomes whole but forever bound to serve the court. Kill our Shadow Lord, and Marcus lives a full human life, but loses all memory of magic, of you, of the love that transcends worlds. Her laughter was like breaking glass. The court has grown tired of waiting for you to choose naturally, my dear, so we're forcing the issue. The trap was sprung with devastating efficiency. Guards materialized from the shadows, not the elegant courtiers Alara had grown accustomed to, but beings of pure nightmare, creatures of shadow and starlight that moved like living weapons. You have until the next full moon rises, Seraphina announced. 3 days in your mortal time. Choose which version of your beloved dies, or we'll kill both and feed on the exquisite agony of your grief for the next 1,000 years. As the guards surrounded them, Kyle moved to protect Alara, his form blazing with silver fire that held the darkness at bay. There's a third option. Morgana's voice cut through the chaos like a blade of pure light. The Weaver of Fates appeared at the library's entrance, her tapestry floating behind her like a battle standard. But it requires more courage than any mortal has ever possessed, and a love deeper than the foundations of reality itself. The court guards hesitated, even Seraphina stepping back from the ancient power that radiated from Morgana's small form. Tell them, Kale said quietly, hope and terror warring in his voice. Tell her about the sundering choice. Morgana's tapestry unfurled completely, revealing images that made Alara's soul ache with their terrible beauty. She saw a woman standing at the intersection of 2 worlds, her hands glowing with power that belonged to neither realm, but to something far older, the raw force of creation itself. The sundering choice, Morgana explained, her voice heavy with the weight of cosmic law, requires the willing destruction of one's own magical essence to reforge the pattern of fate itself. In simpler terms, the Weaver continued, her fingers tracing threads of light that showed possible futures, you would burn away your fairy bloodline, your connection to this realm, your very ability to work magic, and use that power to merge Kale and Marcus back into one complete soul. The images showed the process in devastating detail. Alara standing in a circle of silver fire, her life force streaming out like liquid starlight, knitting together the fractured pieces of Kieran's spirit across dimensions. But, and Morgana's pause carried the weight of absolute finality, the mortal who emerges from that merger will have no memory of the Twilight Court, no recollection of magic, no knowledge of the love you shared here. You would save him completely, make him whole and human and free, but he would be a stranger to you. The Marcus you know would remain, but the Kale you love would be gone forever, existing only in memories you could never share. Kale's anguish was a physical force in the room. No, he said, his voice breaking. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. Not again. Elena died of heartbreak within 5 years of her return, knowing she'd lost something precious, but unable to remember what. I won't watch history repeat itself with her bloodline. His form blazed brighter, silver fire wrapping around him like armor. There has to be another way. Some choice that doesn't require you to lose yourself. Seraphina's laughter cut through their desperation like a knife. Oh, but there is another way, my dears. So much simpler. So much more poetic. Her mirror mask shifted, showing them images of Marcus in the mortal world, growing weaker by the day, aging rapidly as Kale's strengthening presence in the court drained his life force. Do nothing. Make no choice at all. Let nature take its course. The images were horrifying. Marcus collapsing in his garden, dying alone and confused while Kale became fully immortal, forever trapped in a court that would torment him with Alara's presence, but never allow them to truly be together. Inaction is still a choice, sweet child, and often the cruelest one of all. The return to the mortal realm was violent, like being ripped from a dream into a nightmare. Alara materialized in her apartment just as her phone started ringing. Marcus's ringtone, the one she'd set to Chopin's most haunting nocturne. But the voice that answered wasn't his usual warm baritone. It was weak, confused, frightened in a way that made her blood run cold. "Ilara, I think something's wrong with me. I can't remember. There are gaps, missing pieces, and I keep seeing things that can't be real." She found him collapsed in his apartment, surrounded by drawings he didn't remember making. Sketches of the Twilight Court in startling detail. Portraits of her in ball gowns that existed only in another dimension. Studies of a silver mask that captured its ethereal beauty perfectly. "I drew these," he whispered, his hand shaking as he touched one of the images. "But I don't remember drawing them. It's like someone else is living in my head, someone with memories I can't access." His physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. The Marcus she knew, strong, vital, radiating quiet confidence, was fading like a photograph left too long in sunlight. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, and sometimes she could swear she could see through him to the wall behind. "I'm dying, aren't I?" he asked, with the calm acceptance of someone who'd already glimpsed the other side. "Something is stealing pieces of me bit by bit. I can feel it happening. I can save you," she said, the words tearing from her throat like broken glass. "But the cost, Marcus, the cost might be everything we've found together." She told him everything then. About the court, about Cale, about the curse that had split his soul across two worlds. She expected disbelief, denial, anger. Instead, his eyes filled with recognition so profound it took her breath away. "I knew," he whispered. "Not consciously, but some part of me always knew. The dreams, the sketches, the way I felt incomplete until I found you. It all makes sense now. There's a choice I can make," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I can burn away my magic, merge your two halves back together. You'd be whole, healthy, completely human. But you wouldn't remember any of this. Not the court, not Cale, not even the magical version of our love story." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "And if you don't make this choice," he asked softly, "you die, and Cale becomes trapped forever in a realm that will torment him with my absence." She nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. "Then the choice is easy," he said, taking her hands in his increasingly translucent ones. "Save him. Save me. Save us all, even if it means losing this version of what we have." The final night arrived with the weight of destiny pressing down like a physical force. Ilara stood in the center of her flower shop, surrounded by every magical artifact she'd accumulated over months of supernatural encounters. The masks, her grandmother's journal, crystals that hummed with otherworldly power. But most importantly, she held Marcus's hand as he grew more translucent with each passing moment. And through their connection, she could feel Cale's presence in the Twilight Court, weakening as his mortal half prepared for the ultimate sacrifice. "Are you certain about this?" Morgana's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, the Weaver manifesting partially in both worlds to oversee the ritual that would reshape the very foundations of the curse. "Once begun, the sundering cannot be stopped or reversed. You will lose your magic, your connection to the court, your memories of Cale. Everything that links you to the supernatural realm will be burned away to fuel his restoration." "I'm certain," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. Around them, reality began to blur as the barriers between worlds thinned. She could see the Twilight Court superimposed over her humble shop, marble columns rising through her ceiling, ethereal music mixing with the mundane sounds of the city outside. And there, standing at the edge of perception, was Cale, his form blazing with silver fire as he prepared to be torn apart and rebuilt. The ritual circle ignited with light that existed beyond the visible spectrum, power drawn from the deepest wells of creation itself. Ilara felt her magic responding, the fairy bloodline that had shaped her entire existence beginning to unravel thread by thread. Each lost connection was agony. She felt pieces of herself being stripped away, memories of supernatural wonders fading like dreams upon waking. But through it all, she held on to her love for both versions of the man whose soul she was trying to save. "Ilara, no!" Seraphina's voice cut through the ritual's crescendo, the court noble materializing with an army of shadow guards behind her. "You don't understand what you're doing. If you complete this working, you'll destroy more than just your own magic. You'll shatter the barriers that keep our realm stable." For the first time since Alara had known her, Seraphina looked genuinely frightened. "The Twilight Court exists in the spaces between worlds. Remove the anchor points that connect us to mortal reality, and we'll be cast into the void, all of us, forever." The revelation hit Alara like a physical blow, but she didn't stop channeling her power into the ritual circle. "You're lying," she said through gritted teeth, even as doubt began to creep into her voice. "This is just another manipulation, another attempt to keep us trapped in your games." But Morgana's expression told a different story. The ancient weaver looked stricken, as if she'd overlooked some crucial variable in her cosmic calculations. "She speaks truth, child," Morgana admitted, her voice heavy with centuries of regret. "I did not foresee. Your bloodline is more integral to the court's stability than I realized. You are not just Elena's descendant. You are the keystone that holds the bridge between worlds in place." The implications crashed over them like a tsunami. If Alara completed the ritual, she wouldn't just lose her magic. She'd condemn every being in the Twilight Court to non-existence. "Then we find another way," Marcus said firmly, his translucent form growing more solid as he made his decision. "I won't be saved at the cost of thousands of lives." But even as he spoke, his body began to flicker like a dying flame. The connection between his two halves was failing rapidly. They had minutes, maybe less, before the split became irreversible and both Marcus and Kale died. It was Kale who provided the answer, his voice echoing across dimensions as he made the hardest choice of his extraordinarily long existence. "There is a fourth option," he said, his form beginning to blaze with silver fire. "I can choose to die completely, not just fade, but burn out my immortal essence to stabilize the bridge between worlds. Marcus will live, whole and human, with no supernatural memories to haunt him. The court will survive, and Alara," his voice broke, "Alara will be free to love him without the weight of what we shared in shadows and starlight." "No!" Alara screamed, pouring more power into the ritual circle, desperately trying to find a solution that didn't require losing either version of the man she loved. But as her magic reached its crescendo, something unexpected happened. The silver fire of Kale's sacrifice merged with the golden light of her burning bloodline, creating something entirely new, a bridge not just between worlds, but between the fractured pieces of Kieran's soul. The merger was violent, reality reshaping itself around them as past and present. Mortal and immortal, Shadow Lord and Garden Tender crashed together in an explosion of pure possibility. When the light faded, Marcus stood before her, but he was changed, transformed, made whole in a way that transcended the simple healing they'd all expected. He remembered everything, both his mortal life and his centuries as Kale, the love he'd shared with Elena, and the passion he'd discovered with Alara. He was completely, perfectly, impossibly himself. "How?" Seraphina whispered, staring at the impossible figure before them. Marcus smiled, and in that expression was both the shy gardener she'd fallen for and the ancient lord who'd stolen her heart across dimensions. "Love," he said simply. "Not the destructive kind that demands sacrifice, but the creative kind that finds solutions where none should exist." He turned to Alara, whose magic had been transformed rather than destroyed, leaving her connected to both worlds, but enslaved to neither. Elena's descendant and Kieran's beloved, finally in the same place at the same time, choosing a future instead of repeating the past. The Twilight Court still existed, but it was changed, no longer a prison feeding on mortal emotions, but a bridge between worlds where love could flourish instead of being punished. Seraphina and her faction found themselves bound by new laws that prevented them from manipulating mortal hearts for sport. And Alara. Alara discovered that some stories don't end with sacrifice and loss, but with transformation and the courage to choose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. The flower shop that had once been called Petals and Dreams now bore a new name, Between Worlds. Customers came not just for arrangements, but for the sense of magic that lingered in the air like incense, subtle, beautiful, healing. Alara worked alongside Marcus, who brought knowledge of both mortal gardening and otherworldly botany to their shared endeavor. Sometimes, on nights when the moon was full, they would dance in the shop after closing, moving to music only they could hear, celebrating a love that had transcended death dimension, and the cruelest curses that ancient powers could devise. And if sometimes customers noticed silver roses that bloomed without soil, or heard whispers of fairy music drifting through the store on windless days, they simply smiled and made note to return soon. After all, everyone deserves a little magic in their lives, especially the kind that chooses healing over harm, connection over control, and love over everything else the universe might offer. Some masks hide our true faces, others reveal them, but the most powerful magic happens when we choose to remove our masks entirely and love what we find beneath.